A young family vanished without a trace, leaving behind heartbreaking questions and a chilling secret. What really happened to Shanann Watts and her two young daughters, Bella and Cece Watts? In a world of radiant family photos on social media, where everything seems perfect, the Watts family story is a chilling warning about what might lurk behind the smiles. So, what shattered a seemingly forever family? Where was the husband, Chris Watts? And how did he react to the disappearance of his wife and children? Before we begin, if you love true crime stories, please take a moment to support by liking, sharing, or leaving a comment. Your support helps me continue bringing compelling stories like this. Shanann Watts. In her 20s, in the late 2000s, Shanann was an ambitious young woman in North Carolina, always yearning to build a life she could be proud of. With a radiant smile, sleek long hair, and a fashionable style, Shanann easily drew attention. But what set her apart wasn't just her appearance, it was her unyielding spirit. After a failed marriage in 2007, Shanann rose from the pain, determined not to let her past define her. Shanann dreamed of a happy family, a successful career, and a life filled with laughter. She worked hard, trying her hand at various jobs, from sales to management, but always felt she could achieve more. When diagnosed with lupus in 2010, an autoimmune disease causing fatigue and pain, Shanann refused to let it hold her back. She found hope in the health products of Lavelle, a multi-level marketing company with its Thrive line. Shanann quickly became a top distributor, using Facebook to share her journey of overcoming illness and inspiring hundreds. She wasn't just selling products, she was selling a dream, the dream of a better life. But beneath it all, Shanann carried worries. She craved stability, a man who would love her unconditionally, and a home to raise her children. When she met Chris Watts through a mutual friend online in 2010, she saw in him a rare sincerity. Chris didn't try to overshadow her with ambition or flashiness. He was quietly there, listening and supporting. For Shanann, it was the start of a love story she hoped would last forever. Chris Watts was not one for the spotlight. In North Carolina, he lived a simple life, working as an auto mechanic in a small garage. At 25, Chris was a quiet man with brown hair and an average build. He enjoyed the straightforward, fixing cars, watching sports, and steering clear of arguments. But deep down, Chris always felt something was missing, a purpose, a place to belong. He didn't dream of fame or wealth, but he longed to be seen, to feel significant. Chris wasn't good at expressing emotions. Friends described him as easygoing but reserved, always agreeing with others to avoid conflict. His romantic relationships were often fleeting, as he lacked assertiveness and struggled to open up. Chris felt like he was on the sidelines of life, watching others chase dreams while he quietly worked. When he started chatting with Shanann Razuchek on Facebook, everything changed. Shanann was a breath of fresh air, strong, confident, and full of energy. She made Chris feel seen and valued. He was drawn into her world where anything seemed possible. Shanann and Chris quickly became inseparable. Initial messages turned into long phone calls, and soon they met in person. Shanann was drawn to Chris's gentleness, the way he listened without judgment. When she was hospitalized for lupus, Chris drove hours to be by her side, bringing food and holding her hand through the pain. To Shanann, he was a safe harbor in the storm of her life. Chris, meanwhile, was captivated by Shanann's ambition. She spoke of big dreams, a beautiful home, exotic trips, and a happy family. Chris began to dream in ways he never had before. He wanted to be the man worthy of Shanann, to stand by her and build a future together. In 2011, Chris proposed to Shanann during a romantic evening by the beach. She cried as she said yes, and they began planning a life together. They married on November 3, 2012, in a cozy ceremony in Pineville, North Carolina. Shanann glowed in her white wedding dress, and Chris couldn't take his eyes off her. Friends and family remarked that they were a perfect pair. Shanann was the guiding flame, and Chris was the one who kept it burning. After the wedding, they moved to Frederick, Colorado, to start a new chapter. Shanann continued to grow her career with Lavelle, hosting live streams to promote Thrive, while Chris found work at Anadarko Petroleum, an oil and gas company. Their life seemed full of promise. In 2013, Shanann gave birth to their first daughter, Bella Marie Watts. Bella was a gentle girl with brown hair and big round eyes. Shy, she loved singing children's songs and clinging to her mom. Shanann adored Bella above all, frequently posting photos of her on Facebook, from pictures in princess dresses to moments of her sleeping in her mother's arms. Chris also changed as a father. He learned to change diapers, played with Bella, and became more attentive. But he often let Shanann take the lead in parenting decisions. 2 years later, in 2015, Cece Watts was born. Celeste, or Cece, was a spirited girl with curly blonde hair and a radiant smile. Full of energy, she was always running around the house and making everyone laugh. Shanann called her Little Tornado, loving how Cece brought vibrancy to the family. Chris seemed to find joy in being with his daughters, though he remained secondary in their care. The Watts family became an idealized image on social media. Shanann posted videos of family outings, elaborately decorated birthday parties, and moments of Chris playing with Bella and Cece. She boasted about how Thrive had transformed their lives, from helping her manage lupus to providing financial freedom. Chris, in the videos, always smiled and supported his wife, though he spoke little and often stayed in the background. But behind the happy photos, pressures began to surface. Shanann was the driving force of the family, planning everything from parenting to finances. She wanted their life to appear perfect, but this came at a cost. She spent lavishly to maintain an image of success, from clothes for Bella and Cece to expensive family outings. Chris, with a steady but modest salary, felt strained as the family faced mounting debt. In 2015, they were forced to file for bankruptcy with $448,000 in debt, unable to keep up with mortgage and credit card payments, a devastating blow for both. Shanann also grappled with lupus, which left her frequently exhausted and in need of rest. She poured her energy into work and her children, but this left little time to listen to Chris. He began to feel neglected, as if he were merely a supporting role in Shanann's story. He didn't voice it, but resentment quietly built within him. Shanann was the soul of the family, but she bore the heaviest burden. She wanted Chris to be the ideal husband and father, and she often criticized him when he fell short, from forgetting to buy something for Cece to not enthusiastically joining her live streams. Shanann didn't mean to hurt Chris. She just wanted him to share her dream. But to Chris, her criticisms were like small cuts, making him feel he was never good enough. Shanann also clashed with her in-laws. She and Chris's parents had ongoing tensions, and they blocked her on Facebook and refused to attend any events she hosted, including Bella and Cece's birthdays. Shanann complained to Chris about this, but all she got was his indifference and silence. In 2017, Chris began to change. He started working out, lost weight, and grew more confident. Shanann, busy with work and the kids, didn't notice that Chris was searching for an escape. He craved a life where he could be free, unbound by family responsibilities. Then, in May 2018, he met Nicole Kessinger, a contract worker at Anadarko. Nicole Kessinger was a beautiful, independent woman with a carefree life Chris secretly admired. She was drawn to Chris's politeness and new appearance, unaware he lied about being separated from Shanann. They began a secret affair, texting daily, dining out, and even going camping. With Nicole Kessinger, Chris felt alive again. She didn't demand perfection, didn't criticize him, and made him feel significant. Shanann noticed Chris's change in the summer of 2018. He grew distant, spoke less, and was often out of the house. She suspected an affair, but he denied it. Shanann tried to save their marriage, planning family outings and sending loving texts, but Chris responded coldly. When she discovered she was pregnant with their third child, Nico, in June 2018, she hoped the news would bring him back. But Chris only said he wasn't ready, leaving Shanann heartbroken. Chris wasn't skilled at handling conflict. He loved Shanann, but he felt suffocated in their marriage. Nicole offered him an escape, a chance to live a different life. But he lacked the courage to be honest with either Shanann or Nicole. Instead, he lived two lives, lying to both women. In July 2018, Shanann took Bella and Cece to North Carolina to visit family, leaving Chris in Colorado. During these 6 weeks, Chris spent most of his time with Nicole, telling her he was on the verge of divorce. Nicole began pressing him to finalize it, unaware that Shanann was pregnant. Chris felt pressure from both sides. Shanann wanted to save their marriage while Nicole wanted his commitment. When Shanann returned in early August, Chris was barely himself. He refused to touch her, avoided talking about Nico, and even stopped playing with Bella and Cece. Shanann confronted him, discovering strange charges on their bank account, but Chris denied everything. She confided in friends, saying she feared losing him, yet she kept trying, booking a weekend getaway for them. Chris canceled at the last minute, pushing Shanann into despair. On August 12, 2018, Shanann flew to Arizona for a work trip. She left Bella and Cece at home with Chris, hoping he'd bond with them. But in Chris's mind, a horrific plan had taken shape. He no longer wanted a life with Shanann, but he also didn't want to face the consequences of divorce. He wanted a fresh start with Nicole, and he believed the only way was to erase his family. Shanann returned home around 2 a.m. on August 13th, driven by her colleague Nicole Atkinson. But the next day, when Shanann didn't show up for work, Nicole called and texted her with no response. Nicole contacted Shanann's OB/GYN and learned she missed a 10 a.m. appointment to check the baby's heartbeat. Worried, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. On the way, she called Chris, who said Shanann had taken the kids to a friend's house but didn't name the friend. Nicole quickly alerted the police. The police arrived at Shanann Watts' house around noon, nearly at the same time as Nicole. They rang the doorbell, but no one answered. They circled the house trying to find a way in, but the doors were locked. Shanann's car was still in the garage. Just then, Chris returned home, appearing calm, though his behavior was noticeably odd. He agreed to let them search the house. Inside, the police noted the house was tidy, with no signs of disturbance, yet Shanann and her daughters were gone. Shanann's keys, purse, medication, and phone were still there, suggesting she hadn't planned to leave for long. The bedsheet in the master bedroom was crumpled on the floor, but there were no obvious signs of a crime. A pillowcase, however, was found discarded in the kitchen trash. When questioned about Shanann, Chris told police he saw her when she returned at 2 a.m. At 4 a.m., Chris claimed he told Shanann he wanted a separation. According to Chris, they had a heated but civil conversation. By 5:27 a.m., Chris said he loaded his truck and left for work. That, he claimed, was the last time he saw his wife. After a day with no sign of Shanann's return, the police issued a missing persons alert and sought FBI assistance. Chris quickly became the prime suspect due to several suspicious actions. For instance, on the day the mother and daughters disappeared, police discovered Chris had called the school to say Bella and Cece wouldn't return the following year and made a call to list the family home for sale. The police questioned, where was Chris during the time Shanann, Bella, and Cece went missing? GPS data from his truck confirmed he had driven to an Anadarko oil site where he worked. However, the investigation into Chris didn't stop there. On August 15, 2018, with the aid of a drone equipped with a camera, police spotted a bedsheet at the oil site with a pattern matching the pillowcase discarded at the victim's home. That evening, Chris Watts was arrested on suspicion of murder and tampering with a body. During a polygraph test, Chris failed. After requesting and being allowed to call his father, Chris confessed to killing his wife and revealed where he hid the bodies. According to Chris's confession, he and Shanann argued when she returned from her work trip on August 13th. Shanann confronted him about his distance and infidelity. She said if he left her, he'd never see the children again. In a fit of rage, Chris strangled Shanann on their bed. She couldn't resist, and within minutes, she was gone. But the tragedy didn't end there. Chris looked into the next room where Bella and Cece were sleeping. Instead of stopping, he went further. He woke the girls, saying they were going on a trip, and wrapped Shanann's body in a blanket. He placed Bella and Cece in the back seat of his truck alongside their mother's body and drove to the Anadarko oil site. There, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave, then strangled Cece and Bella one by one, stuffing their bodies into crude oil tanks. On August 14th, to cover up his horrific actions, Chris appeared on television, tearfully pleading for his wife and children to return. But his evasive eyes fueled public suspicion. and that suspicion was not misplaced. He was indeed the primary culprit. After Chris's full confession, on August 16, 2018, police found Shanann Watts' body buried in a hastily dug shallow grave. Nearby, the bodies of Bella and Cece were discovered inside 2 crude oil tanks. The workers retrieving Bella and Cece's bodies nearly collapsed at the site. The bodies of the 2 girls had their shoulder bones broken by their father to fit them into the oil tanks, decomposed in a brutally inhumane manner. Chris's description of disposing of his daughter's bodies sent chills through the police and FBI. Chris broke the girls' shoulder bones to force them through the tank openings, a skill he could execute due to his military training in lethal techniques. When Bella's body was removed, her shoulder bones were broken, her skin torn, and her scalp peeled back from being forced through the tank's roughly 20-centimeter opening. Bella's body was filled with oil, indicating Chris strangled her in the truck at the scene. The workers retrieving the girls' bodies were so overwhelmed that some fainted. The autopsy of Shanann revealed the fetus, approximately 16 weeks old, with the uterus, umbilical cord, and fetus protruding. This was explained as possibly resulting from Chris sitting on her while strangling her, the pressure of his body forcing the uterus and fetus out. He then went to the bedroom, grabbed a blanket, wrapped Shanann's body, and dragged it to the truck. However, Chris claimed that Shanann Watts killed their 2 daughters in a rage over his desire for a separation. Upon discovering this, Chris Watts, consumed by anger, killed his wife and disposed of all 3 bodies. The police did not believe Chris Watts' claim, as there was no evidence or indication that Shanann harmed Bella and Cece. On August 20, 2018, the Weld County District Attorney's Office charged Chris Watts with 9 counts. 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree murder of children under 12 or dependents, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. After nearly 2 months in custody, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He admitted to all charges and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, 48 years for the unlawful termination of the pregnancy, and 36 years for disposing of the victims' bodies. On February 18, 2019, during an interview with Colorado police, prosecutors, and an FBI agent, Chris confessed to killing his 2 daughters. Chris described in detail what happened on the morning of August 13th, but could offer almost no explanation for his actions. In the end, a murderer can never escape the path of justice. The case concluded, and that was the price Chris had to pay for his deranged and depraved actions. Currently, Chris is serving his sentence in a Wisconsin prison, confined to solitary confinement for the rest of his life. Chris has stated that the images of his wife and daughters haunt him, tormenting him day after day. Every time he closes his eyes, Bella's final words before he strangled her echo in his mind.
Daddy, please don't.
Today's case comes to a close. The truth still lingers somewhere in the shadows. Thank you for following along with this case. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next thrilling case. See you in the next mysterious fog.